Hello and welcome to Guides.Global. My name's John Howell and I'm the editorial director, and unusually this is a piece just from me about how to choose a lawyer in another country. The reason I'm doing this piece is because I worked as a lawyer specialising in international work for well over 30 years, and so I should know something about it. Now, there are two real issues here. The first is whether you should use a lawyer based in your own country, or whether you should use a lawyer based in the country where you're doing whatever you're doing. And the second is which lawyer you should choose. So, first of all, should you use a lawyer in your own country, or should you go for a lawyer in the country where you're doing your business? And there are pros and cons to that. First of all, I do have to stress that if you're going to think of using a lawyer in your own country, you can't just use your local family or business lawyer that you use for everything else. You do need to use a specialist. Your local family lawyer or business lawyer won't know anything about the law in the country that you're dealing with, won't speak the language probably, won't understand the legal documents, because the law and the system will be entirely different from that to which you're used. So if we're talking about using a lawyer in your own country, we're talking about using a specialist lawyer, and that specialist lawyer could be either a lawyer qualified in your country but has developed an expertise in, say, Mexico or Spain or Germany or whichever country it might be interesting to you, or it could be a lawyer from that country who is now working in your country. And in many countries around the world, there are lots and lots of foreign qualified lawyers who are serving the needs of international business. So, if you're going to use a lawyer in your own country, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Well, there are a number of advantages. The main ones are that you're going to find that that lawyer will be able to speak your language probably better than the lawyer based abroad. Second, you'll probably find that the lawyer, if he's from your country, will understand your point of view and your issues better than the lawyer based abroad. And third, they will be operating in your time zone. And if you're used to trying to contact people from the United States whilst they're in Singapore, you'll realize how inconvenient that can be. But the downside is that it's likely to be slower and it's likely to be more expensive, because the lawyer will have to employ a local lawyer to do certain things that need to be done over there. So that's using a lawyer in your own country. What about using one based abroad? Well, it's more or less the flip side of the advantages and disadvantages of a lawyer in your country. The main advantage the local lawyer will have is that he will understand perfectly the local conditions, the little variations in law and practice that apply in his area, and he will know all of the key people, know the judges, the land registry, the mayor, and everybody else that matters. So that is a big advantage when it comes to sorting out almost any problem. You'll also find that the local lawyer, providing we're talking about a truly local lawyer, one within a few miles of the place concerned, will be able to operate more quickly than a lawyer working from a distance. Probably the worst compromise is using a lawyer based in the country concerned but is 200 or 300 miles from where your problem is, because that means every time they need to do anything, they will have to go there, and they won't want to go just to deal with your little thing on its own. They'll wait till they've got several items to attend to, and that can add weeks or months to the transaction. So that's the question of whether you should use a local lawyer in the country where you're doing business or a lawyer in your own country. But whichever you choose, how are you going to choose which lawyer to work with? Well, the most important thing here is language. Do they speak your language? And I don't mean do they speak it well enough to have a casual conversation in a bar. Do they speak it well enough to explain to you what are probably going to be quite complicated concepts and issues? Do they speak it well enough to understand what you want them to do? And do they understand your point of view, your cultural background, so that they can act appropriately? If they don't understand the language and they can't communicate clearly with you, then the whole thing is doomed from the beginning. Second, are they experienced in the field? Not every lawyer is experienced in every field, and in many of the countries where you're likely to be wanting to do business, you will find that there are generalist lawyers who deal with a much wider range of things than they might in your own country, but they do not deal with everything. So if you've got, for example, a labour dispute, you need to go to a lawyer who is experienced in labour law. If you are buying a property, you need to go to a lawyer who is experienced in dealing with the purchase of properties, and don't be afraid to ask about their relevant experience. Next, do they seem efficient? Looking around their office will give you a good idea about that, but there are still lawyers working in every country who take forever, don't reply to emails, who are constantly making mistakes. So just get a sense of their efficiency. Once you've done all of those things, the next big question is whether you feel you can relate to them. It's much easier to take advice from somebody with whom you feel you have some connection, rather than just a distant stranger. And that's a bit of a bonus if you get that, but it is hugely beneficial if you can find a lawyer who you feel comfortable working with. And then finally, and very much finally, is the question of cost. We all know that some lawyers are more expensive than others, and you may have a budget ceiling for what you're going to want to do, but just going for the cheapest is not necessarily a good idea. Sometimes you have to pay a little bit more for the quality that you're going to need. So that's it. The two big issues. One is, are you going to use a lawyer from back home or one in the country where you're doing business? The second is, which lawyer should you use? I hope you found that useful. If you have, of course, as usual, like us or follow us. And whether you've done that or not, we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you and goodbye.